Welcome to the new Jaguar channel of F Gear. And where best to start than with Sir William Lyons' grandson, Michael Quinn. Michael, welcome.
Thank you, Philip.
This is an amazing event. Here we are celebrating 50 years of the E-Type. What would Sir William have made of all this?
Well, funny, we were talking about that yesterday, watching the parade, when there were, I think, about 850 cars on the track at lunchtime. It was a fantastic sight. I think he would have been certainly proud to see that. Part of him might have wondered quite how so many of them had survived as well, but no, I think it would be a proud moment for him. And to see the level of enthusiasm that accompanies all these cars is truly fantastic.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I mean, it's a great story, the Jaguar story, isn't it? It's so full of so much history, so much passion all over the world. You must encounter this yourself.
Every day. I work in the Jaguar network for a Jaguar main dealer, but I'm constantly exposed to people in the classic car world, and the thing that really amazes me is how tight-knit the community is. There's a great rapport between everybody, and when you look at the team that created the cars, it was almost like a family. There was a real pride, a real passion in what they were doing, and they all seemed to pull together, working all hours. And we're just watching Norman Dewis signing, autographing his biography today, and they worked all hours, these chaps, and they weren't usually paid for it. There was a real enthusiasm for what they were creating.
Absolutely, quite extraordinary, and a very small team created some very great cars. And as you say, Norman refers to it, and he's a great ambassador traveling the world the whole time as this great community, this great Jaguar family. Why is it so special for Jaguar and not the other makes? What makes Jaguar so incredibly special?
Well, I think there are several factors. The small team element is one factor. British team, tremendous amount of pride. The competition was very important. It proved that they could take on the world. Some very big established car manufacturers and beat them at their own game. And then, of course, there's the styling of them. I mean, they are just beautiful cars to look at. There's no way around that. And I guess they were always great value for money, which is one of my grandfather's greatest hallmarks, if you like. He was passionate about keeping them good value, and it made them affordable to a much wider range of people.
He was this extraordinary, unique blend of brilliant stylist and great businessman. Have you theories about where his styling inspiration came from and how he became? Because he was self-taught, really, wasn't he?
Well, we do joke about that a little bit in the family. To be quite frank, we're not sure where it came from. It wasn't as if there was a family history of creation or design, certainly not of engineering. And if we study the way he created cars, they were mostly in full scale, working with a very clever draftsmith or metal crafter, and he would get cars mocked up in full scale and wander around and spend a couple of days looking at them from all angles, tweaking a bit here, not himself personally, but just talking to the craftsman. And when he eventually felt that the shape was right, he would say, right, this is what we built, this is what I want to build, talk to the engineers, draw it up, and this is what we're going to make.
I think a common thread between both elements was an attention to detail, tremendous, whether it's the styling side or the business side. And that is so important, even for a big company, isn't it?
Critical, and I think if you look at his cars, it is the attention to detail, the lines, the shape of the lights, that actually make it work. I mean, let's not forget, we're talking about the E-Type this weekend. He didn't really design the E-Type. It was an evolution of the D-Type, designed on aerodynamic principles by Malcolm Sayer. But I think there's absolutely no doubt that my grandfather would have had lots of final words, shall we say. Yes. Probably the look of the lights, the shape of the bumpers, that sort of thing. I'm sure he had plenty to say on that.
Absolutely, and of course the other thing that was very different about that day and age is that he could be authoritarian. He was the man in charge. He didn't have to talk to a committee, he didn't have to discuss it, and where he made the decisions, and that is a much stronger way to move forward, isn't it?
Absolutely. I think when you have to run all decisions through committees, inevitably there are delays and complications and compromises that come out of that. No, you're right, and he was a sort of a benign dictator, if you like. It was his baby, and the buck stopped with him. He was happy to operate that way, and would issue edicts. And I think you're right. I mean, it actually allows a company to move on, create proper products, and without getting bogged down in politics, if you like.
I always felt, and I wrote, as you know, a biography with Paul Skilliter some years ago of him, and what a remarkable man. I have so much respect for him, but he had tremendous courage, because it was tough times often. All the union problems and all the competition and this, that, or the other. So many of his competitors, so many went to the wall and disappeared, and yet Jaguar persevered and kept going, came through it all, building great cars, but terrific courage.
Yeah, I agree, and obviously he started the business with a partner, but that was very early days, and quite swiftly, when he was really on his own running it, with a very good team, of course, one has to add that. Some superb engineers, and you have to say he picked the right guys to surround himself.
Exactly.
But you're right, he had some real challenges, particularly in the late 60s and early 70s, well, just before his retirement. Had a lot of problems motivating the entire workforce, shop floor, and yeah, it must have taken a lot of courage. I think there must have been a lot of times when he just wondered really what he'd taken on, and because I mean, he never expected Jaguar to get as big as it did. It exceeded all expectations. There were times when I think he probably felt a bit alone, I would think, dealing with labour problems and that sort of thing. And international currencies, export. Obviously, the exports were important. He realised that early on. After the war, he was very quick to realise that he needed to get the foreign dollar involved and to get allocation of steel from the government.
Well, again, Jaguar did a fantastic job for the country. Amazing dollar earner, and this was crucial in those times. Export or die, and Jaguar led the export drive.
Absolutely. No, he realised that to get the American dollar was critical to grow the business, and straight after the war it was critical to get an allocation of steel as well, as I just mentioned. But no, that's where the big market was. He identified that and really was quite single-minded in that, to the sacrifice often of the English market. Early owners of E-types in the UK had to wait a long time before they could get a car. There were only a very tiny minority of people who were allocated a car, so to speak.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Michael, you're obviously dressed for action. What are you up to at Silverstone this weekend?
Well, at the Classic this year, Jaguar Heritage have supported a challenge series of about 4 or 5 races, purely for E-types, with 2 categories, a Class A and a Class B. So basically pre-61 cars, as in very early original spec, and pre-63 cars. And it's always been a dream of mine to race a Jaguar, and particularly an E-type. So I and a friend of mine, Trevor Groom, actually he's done all the work on it, I can't claim to have done any work, have put an E-type together for this race series. So we're here this weekend, first time out of the box, as they say, and it seems to be running very well. Having a lot of fun, really just so happy to be part of it all. And we're racing at 2 o'clock this afternoon, and with any luck we'll have a good finish and without any problems.
Well, you had your first run yesterday. It looked as though it was going well. Also looked pretty slippery out there. A few people were dropping some oil. How was it?
Yes, it was very slippery. And I raced this morning as well in a Lister Jaguar, and that was incredibly slippery. Unfortunately there have been a few people with engines blowing. Not all Jaguar engines, I hasten to add, but the tyres are quite skinny. Being on in this B spec car, which is period E, as the FIA class it, the tyres are quite narrow, and that's designed to be that way, and they do slide quite a lot. So that would probably explain why it all looked a bit hairy.
What else can you tell us about that car? How modified is it? How much you're allowed to do? What have you done?
Well, for period E cars, which is up to 1961, there is actually very little you can do. The first cars that were racing then were really basically just straight off the production line. The brakes are standard, the engine is standard. We've mildly stiffened up the suspension. It's on the original SU carburetors, so no Webers, nothing like that. So it's actually a pretty standard road car. We've obviously put a roll cage in it for safety. You have to put fire extinguisher in it and emergency electrical cut-off. Otherwise, it's really a pretty standard car. You can put a 5.5 inch, just to get technical here, you can put a 5.5 inch wide rim on the back, but otherwise it's all standard.
Just proves what a great car, great concept the E-Type was. I mean, it was a car that you could drive around during the week, or you could go racing at the weekends and not be ashamed of.
Absolutely. It was never designed with competition in mind, but its lineage is pure motorsport. And you're right. And I think it's important to encourage its continued use in competition. It's a great way for people to see them. There's been a lot of movement recently to build lightweight replicas. They were inevitably a lot faster, a lot more exciting. But I think that period cars have tended to be a little bit overlooked. And I think it's part of our intention to maybe take a step back again and go back to cars that are racing as they were. And I think that's important in historic motorsport.
I absolutely agree. Good luck with your race this afternoon. Hope it goes well.
Thank you, Philip.